Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back from hopefully what was a nice holiday weekend for you. And we're glad to be here with you this morning and start out your or maybe midday for you, depending on what time zone you're in. My name is Tyrone Lamb, and I'm with GATC Health. And I am joined by Thomas Philipson. Dr. Philipson is the Daniel Levin Chair of Public Policy at the University of Chicago and the former chairman of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. And we also are joined by Lynn Yu. Dr. Yu is the managing director, CBC Group, and the former managing director at Oppenheimer and Company. And I am the chief business officer of GATC Health. And I apologize, I see my logo is backwards, but I don't want to delay the webinar to fix that. But welcoming you all here this morning, or this afternoon. The topic today is a very relevant one, whereby we're going to talk about some alternative, very very unique new methods of creating financing opportunities for biopharma. And as you guys know, that's a very big deal today. It's always been difficult, but it's been even more difficult in these capital constrained markets, also combined with the importance of getting new drugs into the clinical pipeline. So we're here to give you some ideas on how to do that more efficiently, more effectively, with some tools that are available today. So we're going to start out with Dr. Yu giving us kind of a macro view of the capital markets, the economic environment, financing market for biopharma, and some of those constraints that are existing, and as many of us are so familiar with. And then we're going to have Dr. Philipson talk about some novel insurance-backed investment and financing opportunities that are already creating a tremendous amount of interest in the marketplace. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the GATC AI platform that's in essence enabling all of these things that we're going to talk about this morning, namely the ability to predict risk with such accuracy that enables this de-risking of financing opportunities and insurance-backed policies to help facilitate this insurance for clinical trials. And then we're going to have some time for Q&A at the end. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Yu. Lynn?
Thank you, Titan. It's a pleasure to join everyone this morning. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Just a quick background. My name is Lynn. My professional background is I've been involved in the financing of the biotech, medtech world for the last about 20 years. I was trained as a scientist, and then, as they jokingly said, went to the dark side post my graduate school. Was involved in as equity research analyst, kind of analyzing, the financial market and health of various biotech and medtech companies, and then transitioned to an investor. Spent most of my time actually looking at an investor from an investor perspective in terms of debt and royalty. How do we fund, clinical trials? How do we fund commercial assets? How do we fund biotech companies and biopharma companies to ensure that they have the capital needed to become successful? And that's what I've been doing the last 15 years of my career. I kind of came from a little bit of unique perspective, kind of let's dive right into it. Like what we see in the market. I think for those of you who are familiar with the space, it's no secret that the biotech and the biopharma market has been very challenging, whether it's a public perspective or from a private perspective. I could tell you that the major biotech indices have significantly underperformed the general indices, such as tech, industrial, consumer, right? And this is a kind of a rare phenomenon, right? Historically, we came from an environment, when COVID started, if we go back about 5 years, right? When COVID started, we think that the healthcare market is going to suffer tremendously, tremendous amount of risk, tremendous amount of hurdles. The opposite turned out to be true, right? We never seen a growth, and to be quite honest, the level of funding that came into the biotech market between 2020 and 2022. Granted or so, investors like myself become a little bit more less risk averse, right? We used to joke that assets that has potential get funded immediately. It takes one or two meetings to write a check. And that was the environment because everything gets funded and everything gets funded from the early stage to mid stage to late stage. That certainly has changed. And then what we're seeing is an inversion of that trend in the last couple of years, right? And hence the performance in the public market. And I can tell you, for those of you who are not familiar with the private market, funding is also very difficult. I think some of the stats we read, about a quarter of the public listed biotech companies are trading below cash, which means, in a very layman's term, that these companies held assets, but the public investors think that these companies are worth less, their assets are worth less than what the cash holds. So that's a very dangerous and a risky environment to be in the biotech, right? Part of it is kind of the creation of this slew of companies became public, way too quickly, way too early, right? And then the risk associated with it. Part of it is, investors like myself have become increasingly more cautious. The days of, as I mentioned, the days of writing a check and after when meetings are over, right? Now we're really focused on how do we pick the right horse, to pick the right winner, as investors should be. Another way of saying this is how do we take risk off the table, right? I think statistically there's a major study done a while ago, really outlining how much risk you're taking coming from assets in early to mid to late stage. I think less than 10% of phase one assets in the United States eventually get to the FDA approval process. Less than 50%, end up in phase two that eventually get approved. And then less than, somewhere around 60% of assets, when you hit phase three, eventually get approved. So if you think about it, there's a tremendous amount of risk associated with it, right? But the reward, on the other hand, is coming hand in hand, correlated to what the risk you're taking. So from an investor perspective, right, especially in an environment that's challenging, an environment that I know my peers are becoming more and more cautious in terms of funding the companies, in terms of picking the right asset, right? What do we do? What do we need to do? It boils down to one thing: to reduce the amount of risk the investor is taking, right? To think about an asset is what could we do to maximize the probability of success and minimize the risk of the asset failing, right? It is, at the end of the day, biotech investing is unfortunately a little bit binary, right? An asset succeeds, you have a very successful investment. If it fails, there's no recoup, there's no assets you can kind of take it back, right? You're basically become a zero-sum game. Now, the topic, obviously, what will help us, I think what's interesting, emerging in the last 5 years is really the quick advancement in AI, right? How do we leverage AI as a tool to help us, and as investors, to help us take some of the risk off the table, to help us make a more educated investment decision? I think these are very key points that, I'm sure Ty and Dr. Philipson will dive into today, and that's the challenge we're facing, right? How do we take a risk? How do we leverage AI and the current AI capability to take a risk off the table? So with that, I'm going to pause and kick it back to Ty and Dr. Philipson.
Thank you, Len. Yeah, I just came back. Actually, I was GATC. We were presenting at the AI and Drug Discovery and Development Conference in Boston last week, early part of last week, and it was interesting that the common theme, to add on a little bit what Len was saying, is that there was a lot of scientists that were in the room talking about the pressure that they're getting from their C-suite about using AI to get results. And AI is absolutely making impact in drug discovery and drug development, and it will continue to make impact. However, the way to make impact today is to use AI to predict as early as possible the likelihood of a drug succeeding or failing against some clinical endpoints that are designed before even designing the clinical trial. So there was an overall consensus, like what Len was saying, is that you have AI that's going to make an impact in terms of the discovery and the development, but today we need AI to make an impact in terms of the economic model. How do we de-risk the investment decision making that not only the investors are making, but the CEO and the CFO are making within the biopharma company to determine how do they spend their dollars. Because as everyone on this call knows, it's the as I've heard many times, it's the unsexy capital spend that happens early in the discovery process that they don't get credit for, but it's a huge burn on their capital. So with that, let's turn it over to Thomas to talk about what things are available today to take advantage of this AI predictive model.
Yeah, so we have developed a new insurance mechanism, insurance policy that's been launched by Lloyds of London to help essentially de-risk biotech funding. I spent a lot of time in biotech, and Ty mentioned some of my background. I used to be chief economist at FDA and CMS as well, and co-founded a healthcare analytics company that served about the 50 largest biopharma companies. We sold that in 2015. Blackstone currently owns that company. From that experience, it was clear to me that many investors thought biotech was too risky. And so we figured out a way, I think, to essentially de-risk biotech investments through this new insurance policy that Lloyds of London has now launched, and currently is sitting about essentially 10 companies have now, we're literally launching it as we speak, and they're sitting on about 10 companies. We have talked to about 70 companies altogether. 100% of them are interested in using this form of financing. So it's a very easy sell if you're a broker on the call to essentially get companies interested in this, and we're lining up the capital to basically match the insurance. So how would this work? The simplest case I can think of is describing an example. So suppose you have a $10 million trial that you want to launch. It could be phase 1, 2, or 3. The insurance only insures the trial cost. It's not going to insure FDA decisions. It's not going to insure your G&A, etc. It insures the cost of the trial. And the insurance premium would, in this case, be anywhere between 25 and 30%, so $2.5 to $3 million. The easiest way for companies to use this is to basically only raise the insurance premium. So instead of raising $10 million to run their trial, they're now raising, let's say, $2.5 million to buy the premium from Lloyds. Once they purchase the insurance from Lloyds, if the trial endpoints fail as defined in the insurance contract in a bespoke manner to each trial, when the trial fails in terms of its endpoints, they will be paid back $10 million in that case. If the trial succeeds, they will not be paid anything. The reason the companies like this when they do equity financing is twofold. There's two benefits if they then turn around essentially to their investors and say, hey, we have a trial we're trying to finance. If you invest in us and the trial fails, you will get your money back. If the trial succeeds, you will get the equity just as normal. You will participate in the valuation gain from a successful trial. So no downward risk in financing this trial. On top of it, if they are insured, that's a signal that Lloyds through GATC, so GATC is the main underwriter of Lloyds, which is going to be used to screen which trial are insurable or not. By the mere fact of having qualified for the insurance, you're also telling your equity investors that you had a complimentary, if you want, due diligence to what they're doing through the Lloyds underwriting through GATC that says this is more likely to be a successful molecule, essentially. So not only are you getting downward protection, you're also getting an increased probability of success by the mere fact of being underwritten by Lloyds and passing the underwriting. The underwriting and the application with Lloyds is confidential, proprietary. So if you fail the underwriting, future investors will not know about it. So, presumably, if you succeed in the underwriting, that's something you want to make public. There's another use of the insurance, which is for debt. So that was the equity part. The debt part is essentially you, again, as a company, take out $2.5 million or raise $2.5 million to get the insurance premium paid. Once you're insured, we have coupled up with about 5 venture debt companies that will then lend you the $10 million for the trial. If the trial succeeds, you have engaged in non-dilutive funding, which presumably current equity holders like. If the trial fails, the debt gets paid by Lloyds of London to the lender. So you have no worries. You're not laying awake at night worrying about a failed trial and a big loan due. Because if the trial fails, the loan is paid. You don't know anything. Lloyd is paying both interest and principal to the lender in that case. So many companies who have the ability to get the loan issued based on the insurance view it as superior to debt when you succeed. Superior to equity when you succeed because you have non-dilutive funding, and superior to debt when you fail because you're not going bankrupt due to a trial failure and a loan, essentially. So this is not venture debt, which many companies are scared of. And the reason they're scared is because they're going to have a big loan due when things don't go well, and that's taken out by the insurance in this case. There's also a philanthropic use of this, and we're also talking to NIH at the government. And philanthropically, we're talking to Stand Up to Cancer, which is one of the main advocacy groups for cancer funding into trials. And the reason it's valuable for philanthropical government use is that those organizations get more shots on goals by buying insurance and then letting the companies finance their trials after the insurance, just as we said. So instead of funding one trial for $10 million, these organizations can fund 4 premiums and let 4 trials essentially be executed by the recipients of the funding, having their premiums financed and then going out finding funding when they're secured through the premiums, essentially. So that's more shots on goal for these organizations. Just as in the equity and debt case, it's not only more shots on goal, it's also better shots on goal because you screen the GATC underwriting at Lloyds for these organizations. So there's an interest also in that using the insurance for that level, for that lever. So I think I'll stop there on the uses of the insurance, and then we'll open up for questions on exactly how it works in terms of applications and process getting insurance covered.
Great. Thanks, Thomas. I'm going to before we open up for Q&A, I want to take a couple of minutes and give some information and some confidence around how is it that Lloyds of London are able to predict this level of risk so they can provide the policies necessary and a business model that works. So let's talk a little bit about GATC Health. So that's the company that I'm with. So GATC Health, we are an AI technology company that has developed a platform that mimics human physiology. And from that, we do discover drugs, and we work with biopharma companies to support them taking drugs that have been either discovered in-house or with them or collaboratively into clinical trials. So we're not a pharma company, we're a technology company, but we're enabling that discovery and development process. So as part of the platform that we have developed and operate, it's an independent platform that in essence runs an in silico clinical trial of the drugs that have been discovered in silico. And through that, and this is now going back a couple of years, we took literally thousands of drugs that had various levels of success based on FDA data, and we were able to retrospectively demonstrate that we could predict safety and efficacy and off-target effects within the mid 80%, which, as you know, when you have a 10% success rate of a clinical trial going years and potentially billions of dollars, that was a huge milestone. Then we decided to make that working with University of California, Irvine, where we did a blinded retrospective study where University of California, Irvine sourced their own data, and we did some other things to blind the study as well, or the challenge as well, and the results were actually even greater. So, and you can find this on the GATC Health website, where we were able to successfully predict specificity with about 91%, and then sensitivity at 86%. So these are extremely high numbers that were validated by a major research university. That in turn led to Lloyds of London saying, hey, this is the kind of accuracy that we're looking for, this kind of predictability that we're looking for, that we could understand risk early enough and write policies against that. So that kind of story, I think, gives you the background about how this relationship started. Now, GATC has since productized that service, and you've heard the terms de-risk a lot in this so far in this webinar. So we are using the brand de-risk with a Q, DERISQ, as the service, this product that we're offering that enables biopharma and insurance and finance companies to predict in the future how a drug is going to perform against targets from a safety, efficacy, and non-obvious off-target effects. This is a very acute tool that can be used today to de-risk these capital and financing decisions. So to close before we go to Q&A, as Thomas had said, what we're finding is these biotech companies, these biopharma companies, now with an insurance policy in hand, there's three benefits. One is when they're out either raising capital or equity, they now have a major, the world's largest insurance brand that's associated with backing up that capital decision. The second thing is you have obviously access to capital that you may have not had access before, and thirdly, you have an AI predictability that has been validated through several sources that demonstrates that your drug against the targets you've identified for your primary condition and secondary and third, actually, we go deeply into that, have shown that they can perform successfully to a certain level of outcomes in a clinical trial. So you're getting three benefits of this. So I can see we've got a number of questions. The first one is on what's the application process? So how does a biopharma company go about applying for an insurance policy? Thomas?
I can take that. So there's several steps in the application. So first of all, it's handled by a broker. So Lloyd's has brokers for every insurance policies they sell. The broker in this case is Acrisure. It's the sixth largest broker in the world. If you're a Steeler fan, it's the Acrisure Stadium that they're playing in. So they are a well-positioned broker for this space. They also worked a lot with clinical trials in the past. You will first be in contact with them. They will send you an application form, which basically tells them what is the drug class that you're trying to insure the trial in, what phase is it in. We are currently launching trial cost in between 5 million and 45 million, essentially in that range. So it could be phase 3 if it's a smaller phase 3 that's not one of these giant $100 million trials. But phase 1 or 2 or 3. And we're shooting for premiums, like I said, between 25 and 30% of the trial cost involved. And then once you fill out that application form, they will send you a non-binding term sheet that tells you the premium level they're willing to insure you. You can use that to raise capital against it. Once you then come in and says, yes, we want to go ahead to be underwritten by Lloyd's for purchasing of the insurance, that becomes a binding commitment, because we can't have people come in and drain the resources of GATC, who's the exclusive underwriter of the molecule in this case for Lloyd's, and basically then walk away if we say yes. So if you then apply for underwriting, you're bound to pay the premium if we say yes. If we say no, there's no cost at all involved for the company applying for the insurance. So you're not paying an application fee. That's in the premium for the people who succeed in getting the finance. So those are the main three steps. It usually goes quicker than standard ways of raising funds. So we anticipate that if you do the equity route, that's the quickest route, because then you're only getting the insurance from Lloyd's essentially. We predict that be a month or two from start to finish before we first have the application and then move forward with GATC. If you're applying for debt, we have debt, like I said, we have venture debt companies that we have coupled up with. Then there's a second set of underwriting that takes place through the lender, which determines the credit worthiness of the company. Typically, these lenders it's counterintuitive because lenders are mainly concerned when things are not going well for companies. In this case, when things don't get well, they get paid by AA rated Lloyds if the trial fails. They're not concerned about the trial failing. They're concerned about the trial succeeding. And then there's being issues with refinancing the company and paying back the loan afterwards, essentially. So there will be credit underwriting that takes place. Our discussions with them so far has indicated they are mostly initially, at least, not necessarily in the future, in a half year or a year, but initially they're more interested in more robust companies, meaning you have cash on the balance sheet, you have potentially multiple assets, etc., to guarantee that this refi risk when you succeed is not an issue, essentially. So if you're a small phase 1 or phase 2 company, the equity route is not only more likely to succeed, but also quicker in terms of going from start to finish.
Well, thank you, Thomas. Another question here is what happens if I apply for the insurance and I am not underwritten. I do not get the policy that I apply for. Okay, so I can take that one on. So GATC Health, our agreement is with Medical Commercial International, MCI, who is the exclusive syndicate for Lloyds of London for this insurance policy. So if a biopharma company applies for the insurance and they for whatever reason, they are not insured. We have a relationship whereby that biopharma is now referred back to GATC Health. So as Thomas had mentioned, if the applicant gets as far as running the GATC de-risk analysis on their drug, and at that point, if the endpoints are not satisfactory in order for Lloyds to do the underwriting, then at that case, that report is not shown to the biopharma company because that's a specific report for the underwriting. So that's kept by MCI and Lloyds. But what happens is that biopharma company is now referred to GATC Health. And at that point, and this has actually happened a couple of times, whereby we can develop a direct relationship with the biopharma company. We can elucidate all of the issues associated with safety, efficacy, or non-obvious off-target effects that cause that insurance policy not to be offered. And then we can help that biopharma company, in essence, fix the problems that were causing that not to pass. Okay, great. The next question, now we're getting more macro. I love it. So the question, and this may be, I can start out with this, but I think, Lynn, this may be for you as well, which is not from just the insurance side, but from the investment side. How can this type of predictability technology be used by an investor to de-risk their investment during due diligence? So I'll start out, but Lynn, you give the macro. The short answer is there are a number of financing companies, VC companies, investment banks that are in the process, I will say, of offering this de-risk analysis as part of their due diligence efforts that they have with the biopharma companies that they're looking at investing in. But Lynn, you want to tackle what impact could this have on the investment community having this type of predictability?
Yeah, I think that's the key, right? As I mentioned, the word that I keep on going back to is de-risking, right? How important is de-risking? Every investment decision that everyone makes, myself included and our peers, is based on how much risk we're taking, right? How much risk we're taking correlates how much return we're looking at. Obviously, in early stage assets, like I mentioned, if you have a phase 1 asset, there is likely a 10% probability chance to succeed. And, what we are asking for return, a very high attractive return or reward will be associated with that, right? From a company perspective, if that 10% through AI, through proprietary, reporting is moving up, let's say double to 20%, then the return profile we're going to ask is going to be significantly different, right? And significantly lower. which means from a company perspective, the cost capital is going to be lower. That's the immediate impact of such things. And from our perspective, obviously, a difference between 10 to 20% is very meaningful, right? That could be the difference between us investing capital versus us holding the capital back and investing in something else. So those two aspects are key, right? One, it does impact the risk profile impacts how much if you're a company looking at funding, it impacts how what the cost of that funding is, right? And which is very crucial in an early stage, especially in an environment like I just described, right? It's challenging. Investors are very much holding on to the purse string and then stay on the sideline. We're looking for assets that are a better risk reward profile, and that's number one. So the cost of capital from a company perspective will be more reasonable. And number two, we will feel more comfortable, right? Given that it is almost like a little sneak peek into the future of how the assets can perform if there's a kind of a, let's call it the proof stamp approval, right? And then that will remove a little bit of risk from our perspective, from our calculus, and we're more likely to deploy capital invest. So these two aspects are correlated, right? And it will lower the cost of capital for company looking for funding, and also it will drive more funding into the field now that the risk has been reduced to a certain extent.
Got it. Thomas, anything to add to that?
No, I think it's good. I think you can go on to the next question.
Okay, perfect. So the next question is a good question, which is, are there any particular drugs that are or are not a part of this program? So I would answer that by saying basically virtually all therapeutic areas, anyone with different therapeutic areas should apply. All the major therapeutic areas are covered. If there's ones that are on the margin, we would take a look at those individually. As far as drugs, we look at small molecules, biologics, proteins, enzymes, lipids in general, and others. So it's a very broad category of drugs and therapeutic areas that can be analyzed for prediction. The next question is, I know, Thomas, you got into this a little bit, but what is addressing again, what is the cost of the insurance policy?
Yeah, so if you have like I said, we're shooting for 25 to 30% of the trial cost. So if you're planning to raise for a $10 million trial, you now only have to raise for $2.5 to $3 million raise for an insurance policy, after which the subsequent raise, whether it's debt or equity, gets facilitated quite easily. Again, there's no application fee for you to get the coverage because that's covered through the premiums, essentially, for the people who buy the coverage. So there's a costless process going through the process were you to be rejected. Like I said before, if you decide you want to go forward with underwriting, there's a binding commitment that you buy the policy if GATC determines that you're eligible for.
Perfect. Okay, and then the next question is you get right where we were going to go last, which is how do I apply? So I'm going to give you, well, first, the easiest email is if you email me, I'll refer you over to Acrisure, and my email address is simply ty@gatchealth.com. So ty@gatchealth.com. And the point of contact at Acrisure is Dave Pfeiffer, and that's Pfeifffer. And Dave's email address is D, and then his last name, so DPFEIFFER at Acrisure RE, and that's Acrisure, ACRISURERE.com. But again, to keep it simple, if you send the email to me, ty@gatchealth.com, I'll forward you to the right people. So one more question here, which is again back to the timing. So how long should they expect from the initial inquiry or application through the insurance policy being bound? Thomas?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a sort of a process, a little bit company specific, depending on quick company on your end turn things around. The first thing that happens with Acrisure is you get an NDA in place, a mutual NDA, so that your everything is protected essentially. Like I said, afterwards that you get once that has been set up, and some companies take 2 weeks with their lawyers, some companies take one day with their lawyer. So but given that that's passed, you're then due to get an application form where you fill out about your drug, essentially what you do, how far you're into the planning process of the trial, when it's going to take place, how big it is in terms of budget, what disease class it is, etc. That is only a 2 or 3 page document that you then send back to Acrisure. You then that gets translated to MCI, that then comes with a binding quote for, or sorry, non-binding term sheet for the premium, which you get to decide upon if you want to move forward. Again, that's sitting on your end, how long that takes. But if you turn around everything within, 2 or 3 days on your end, this can go very, very quickly because the main hurdle here is GATC underwriting in terms of getting the molecule and your data into GATC that they can underwrite the molecule essentially, and that will take a month roughly, could take less depending on backed up we are with applications. And then once that's clear, and MCI will probably sit on it for a week to determine not only the molecule but also design issues with the trials. And we are having help potentially by some other organizations on looking at design issues as opposed to molecule issues. That is to say, trial design issues. Is this trial recruitable? Can you get subjects into it given what is going on in other parts of the trial space? So we're actually in discussions with MD Anderson for oncology trials. They run about 1,000 trials a year. They know a lot about which trials can be recruited in if they're well designed, etc. But that MCI is automatically doing that parallel to GATC. So I would say with a normal response for a company essentially coming back, it could take less than 2 months and can go even quicker if they on their end don't spend a lot of time.
So with that, I'm going to ask Thomas and Lynn, and all three of us will offer some closing thoughts here. I hope this webinar has been informative. Obviously, we're all available to answer more specific questions. I will say that the type of companies and the drugs that companies are applying for, it's really been all over the map. This is not, this is not a once, it's not a service that is very narrowly defined. It's very broadly defined because you want to cast a wide as net as possible. So, Lynn, you want to kick us off with, closing thoughts on this, please?
Sure. I'll keep it high level. I think, AI is inevitable, right? And everyone's effort is to create a better, healthy future for everyone. And AI is part of it. And, whether it's coming from drug discovery, whether it's coming from optimization, whether it's coming from securing funding for companies leveraging AI capability, I think AI is going to be a part of healthcare, right? And then taking risk off the table, help biotech companies fund it to find successful molecules. All these are big high level goals I think we should all strive for. And, there's something that we should truly be excited about.
Thank you, Lynn. Thomas?
Yeah, I think the key here is the 10,000-foot picture I have is that biotech is very risky. There's a 50% if you think of it in sort of average terms of each phase, which means 12.5% for 3 phases of success. So essentially what we're doing here is de-risking that biotech investment. And the reason that comes down to the micro level is that once you're insured with Lloyds, you can go to your investors, whether those are debt investors or equity investors, that you normally did not go to because biotech was too risky for them. But if you have an insured trial, an equity investor doesn't have to be a VC. It could just be anyone who's interested in investing in biotech where you have now gotten rid of essentially the downward risk of the trial failing essentially, and they losing all their money. They're getting their money back when the trial fails. So you can reach a larger set of investors once you are insured with this product, and that I think is the key of the de-risking biotech.
Thank you, Thomas. And I'll close by saying that as I said at the very opening, is that AI, as Lynn has said, it is inevitable. It's going to be an inevitable part of the discovery and the development process, the clinical trial design process, even the regulatory process. AI is being integrated as we speak. Having said that, that's going to take some time to integrate those processes into discovery and development and see the fruition of those efforts. But today, the opportunity is for boards, CEOs of these biotech companies, these major investors to say, how do I use AI today? Within a couple of months, I can actually use this to predict what's going to happen with my drug in the clinical trial, to the level that I can get an insurance policy to back that up, which I can go in, and that's going to, of course, make it easier for me to get the financing that I need to get my drug into the clinical trial. Worst case scenario, you find out that there are risks associated with getting your drug into the clinical trial. So it's an upside on both ends. With that, I thank all of you. We had a wonderful turnout here today. I'm sure there are even more questions. I know there's more coming up as we go along, but we're out of time. Please feel free to reach out to me. Again, Ty, at gatchealth.com. We will forward your question over to the appropriate parties. If you're interested, of course, directly with the insurance policy, we'll connect you directly with Acrisure to follow up on that application process. So with that, Thomas, Lynn, thank you for your time today. Everyone that's joined, thank you for being a part of the webinar, and we'll hopefully have a chance to speak with you in the near future. And have a wonderful week. Thank you all.